Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next session of CMEpalooza Fall 2021. This session is entitled What's My Line? The CMEpalooza edition. This is our after lunch session sponsored by Physicians Education Resource. My name is Scott Kober. I am one of the co-producers of CMEpalooza. Our moderator for this session is Phil Talamo. Phil is the president of Physicians Education Resource. So as we do with all of our CMEpalooza sessions, I want to start by thanking our sponsors, our gold sponsors, Med Learning Group, Physicians Education Resource, and Projects in Knowledge. Our silver sponsors, Peer Audience, Academic CME, the Academy for Continued Healthcare Learning, Integrity Continuing Education, Hippocrates, and Platform Q Health Education. And our bronze sponsors, MedIQ, Medscape Education, CMEology, PBI, Vindico Medical Education, RMEI, Global Education Group, Real CME, Answers in CME, Helio CME, Creative Educational Concepts, Infograph Ed, Prova Education, DKB Med, Evolve Medical Education, Right Medicine, Spire Learning, Red Med Ed, CME Outfitters, and Excalibur Medical Education. So as with all of our sessions, there are two ways that people can ask questions during the live broadcasts. You can use the Medscape text line to send in a question. The number is 267-666-0CME, that's 0263. Or you can tweet your question to us using the CMEpalooza hashtag. We will get to as many questions as we can during the session. So we will be incorporating an audience response system during this presentation via the Peer Audience response system, which is Poll Everywhere. You can either download the Poll Everywhere app if you haven't already done so and join the presentation entitled CMEpalooza 005, or type in the URL that is on your screen in your web browser. Finally, brief speaker disclosures. Please note that the opinions, discussions, and/or conclusions expressed during this session are those of our panelists and do not represent an endorsement by or position of their employer, its parent company, or their affiliates. And with that, I am going to turn things over to Phil to get us started.
Very nice. Thank you, Scott. That was an excellent introduction. And welcome to the first session of this afternoon, the post-lunch session entitled, What is My Line? The CMEpalooza edition, where we are going to be hosting a talk show style discussion on several diverse roles and organizations within our wonderful CME community. We're going to talk about our day-to-day duties, unique programs that we've worked on, and ways that we interact with each other with the goal of highlighting the amazing work that our diverse community has done and can do. So joining me today is truly an incredible panel of experts, and I'd like to ask each of them to introduce themselves shortly, who they are and where they work. And of course, in the spirit of talk shows, one of my favorite questions to start off is, if you were the host of a real-life talk show, who would be the first guest you would have on to interview in your debut episode, and why? So let's start. David, why don't you kick us off?
That's a tough question, but given that a lot of what we do is storytelling, I think of David Lynch, the director and visual artist. I mean, talk about somebody who's got such a unique, singular approach to storytelling that movies and other TV shows that resemble it are called Lynchian. So, I mean, he's also a really authentically weird character. And so, you get somebody like that on a talk show, you're going to have some really unexpected discussions. And I think that makes for great TV. So David Lynch is my answer.
I think that's a great answer. And I love how you're so excited to say it. You didn't say who you are or where you worked.
You got my name at the bottom there. I work at RMEI. We're a accredited medical education company based in New Jersey, founded in 2005, jointly accredited and also HIPAA verified compliant.
Very nice. All right, Diane, over to you.
Hi, I'm Diane Alberson. I'm the Director of Education Development at the American Association of Clinical Endocrinology. Sorry, that's a mouthful. If I were to have a talk show host, I think the first person I would have on is Jim Gaffigan. He is just a funny comedian that literally takes the most mundane in life, regular life, and makes humor out of it. And I think that everyone could use a little laugh. So,
very good. Good answer. Okay, Lynn, how about you?
Hi, I'm Lynn Kalea, and I am the program director at Haymarket Medical Education, program management, oversee all of that part of the business. And my talk, well, I mean, I was going to start, I was actually said to my husband this morning, gee, I wonder who I should interview if I was to do that. And he said, well, probably me, so I could tell everybody what it's like living with someone that does what you do for a living. But, besides that, my favorite, I read a book a while ago, and you all may have heard of it, but it was Atul Gawande, The Checklist Manifesto. I just fell in love with it. I did it for a book club at work, and I thought, ugh. But reading it, he is an amazing storyteller. He's a physician in Boston, and he talks about things of how these simple checklists, and I know we're in the middle of program management, so it kind of sounds like a play on what we're talking about, but how it really changed infection control in hospitals, airline pilots, you name it. And the stories he tells, it's just an amazing read. Checklist Manifesto. I would have him on.
I had him in my top 3, Lynn. Good choice.
Really? Oh, good. Oh, sorry.
Very good. Well, and I'm Phil Salama. I'm the president of PER, and I know you're dying to hear, and some people already know this, but if I was going to run a real life talk show in my pilot debut episode, I would absolutely have Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson on there, because I love The Rock. I think he's an amazing person. He's got a great story, and I would debate anybody to the end of time. Every single movie would be better if Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was in it. End of story.
That's
so
great.
Very good.
Very good.
So, thanks so much. And before we begin, I do want to reiterate the disclosure that Scott gave, that any thoughts and perspectives shared in this session are our own and do not reflect that of our employers, organizations, or affiliates. And I know he said it already, and I know he's laughing because he said you don't have to say it again, but I wanted to say it again because it's CME and you're supposed to do that. So as we get started, before we get rolling, I want to start off with a couple of ARS questions. So take out your poll everywhere. Get your fingers warmed up. We're going to send in some text. What is your organization type? What type of organization do you work for? And I wish I had a live band over here, but the check I sent them in advance bounced, and they just didn't show up. Very good. I love the other. I'd love to see what an other is. Drop it in the comment if you can, and Scott can shout it out. We've got a couple of others. Very good. All right, here, this is an interesting one. So the question is, how many hats do you wear at your organization? And this is kind of a tricky one, but we're trying to look at the different diversity of roles in there. You know, do you do one thing? Do you do two things? Do you do a little bit of everything? Do you actually do everything? And this is for real. This is what it feels like. We'll take a look at kind of the size and scope of your responsibility in your organization and department.
And I will say, Phil, while we're waiting, we already got a comment on the text line, someone disagreeing with The Rock making every movie better.
So you can reach out to me, Pete Salama at go2per.com, and I would love to debate you on this because it's the truth. Every movie.
All right, how about The Godfather?
Oh.
Absolutely better.
Would he be Luca Brasi?
That's the thing. He's so versatile. He could be any character, and it would just be amazing.
All right. How about Out of Africa? Would he be the Redford character or Streep?
You know, I don't know. That's a tough one. But let's keep it bouncing. Okay, very good. So we don't have that many people with very focused responsibilities, which is interesting too. So everybody's kind of multitasking to a lot of different things. So let's keep that in mind. And I think that this will be a really nice discussion as we go through. So as we go through this wonderful talk show format, I do want to encourage people to submit questions. You'll see Scott will pop in and out. He'll pitch them over in the chat, and we're gonna talk about them. So it's going to be fantastic. So Without further ado, I would really like to welcome our first guest to the talk show, David Clausen, the CHCP, Vice President of Educational Strategy of RMEI. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Phil. Good to be here.
Very, very good. So tell me a little bit, like, where do you work right now? Where did you work beforehand? Give me your quick story.
Sure. So RMEI, I've been at RMEI for 7 years. As I was mentioning earlier, we're jointly accredited, HIPAA compliant, and with a real heavy focus in patient centricity. And we'll kind of get into that maybe in a little bit. But suffice to say, we incorporate patients into a lot of our activities as faculty and work with a lot of patients. We, founded in 2005, so about 16 years young now, and about a mid-sized company in the space. So it's been a lot of fun so far, and there's a lot of great stuff to talk about. But my career started in healthcare back in '99. I was selling advertising space in medical journals, actually one that's currently under your stable in the MJ Hennessy group, Pharmacy Times. So I started out in pharmacy, really enjoyed selling ad space, but then was recruited to join a startup in 2001, an affiliate of Johns Hopkins called Advanced Studies in Medicine. And that was an incredible experience. Startups are fun, especially when you've got a big name like Hopkins behind you. I did a lot of different things, again, to that, like wearing different hats. But primarily, it was about fundraising, educational design, and even outcomes. We started doing ARS pre-post outcomes, I think, the first time in 2004. And then, the outcomes deliverable was a lot different, but it evolved over the years. And spent a while there, about 7 years, and then moved on to a couple of other startups, and then finally landed at Real CME back in 2011. And that's where I got to work with a variety of different providers. So folks that's when I first met Lynn. We were meeting with the Haymarket Group and got to see a lot of different ways that providers work, different types that are out there, and different ways that we handle outcomes. And that was really the main focus there, was looking at how to help providers do better or different outcomes. Investment 2 years at Real CME into RMEI, and that's kind of the story in a nutshell. But I see like data and analytics as sort of the backbone of so much of the work we do, because ultimately the point of what we're doing is improving healthcare delivery, and you can't improve what you don't measure, right?
Yeah. So with CME, with your perspective and the different places you work, why do you love CME? Like, what do you love the most about it?
Man, I
got to assume you love CME, right? Like, maybe.
I love it. Well, education has been in my blood since I was in high school. I gave a speech to the New Jersey State Board of Education back when I was like a junior or something about the importance of experiential learning and how classrooms need to be sort of updated to affect that. And so after that, I was selling books door to door in college, educational books for kids. And so it's all this educational thread is pulled throughout my life. And I think I love it because of that I get to do something that's kind of deeply ingrained, the importance of improving, in this case, improving healthcare delivery, which, everybody can get behind. And the fact that it's constantly changing, that right now you can never say like, I did this year and, I've kind of nailed it on CME. And that's the story. If you really look at the past 50 years, all these other industries, manufacturing, technology, what have you, have undergone like revolutionary changes. And the education field has stayed more or less static, except for maybe like the past 10 or so years. And we're in the golden age right now. So you get up every day and you get to do things like change the way care is delivered, and then always have a new challenge. There's a lot to love.
Very nice. So we've got a pretty good background of some diversity on the call right now, especially in the audience. Tell me a little bit about your title, Educational Strategy. What does that really mean?
Well, let's be honest about what it really means. Back in like 2008 or so, the term business development became a dirty word, and we can no longer use that. Essentially, this role, educational strategy, in all practical terms today, is kind of marrying three kind of core areas. One is like just overall business strategy. When you make decisions about where the company is going to focus in a way that's going to be unique and differentiated against all the other options out there in the marketplace. So keeping that business strategy piece in mind, marrying in, insights on educational design, which reflect what's going on in the actual delivery of care, helping to decide on new products that really relate to and resonate with the end user, the clinicians, but which also are feasibly implemented, right? So that when you are going through the rounds and working with medical and working with other folks in the company to generate a proposal that costs money to do, you're also making sure that it's, from a business perspective, fundable, right? There's going to be companies out there that have an interest in providing the funding. So it's kind of marrying those three areas into one role, and then being able to collaborate with a lot of different people in different functions who aren't thinking necessarily the way you are, but who are all kind of interlocked in the same mission. So I don't know if that was just more confusing or less.
The first thing I heard was bringing in the money. So bringing the bacon. So that makes sense to me. All right. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about your experience in that design. So I know one of the very unique things about RMEI is this patient centricity. What does that mean? Give me a look at that. How do you do that?
Yeah. So patient centricity, for us practically, it means, for one, incorporating real, authentic, experienced patients into the faculty alongside your clinical faculty. It's, Graham McMahon captured it best probably in his articles in JAMA and New England back in 2015 and 2016, where he talked about capturing the hearts as well as the minds of our clinician learners. And so it starts with that, recognizing that the patient is part of the healthcare team, that they deserve to be part of the educating team as well, where appropriate. And so that's been a competency that we've developed internally over the years, but it also means how you think about educational design. Are we leaving room in that design for clinicians to stop and remember that all the insights, the complex, data-driven insights that we're trying to communicate in education are also, you're also keeping the patient in mind too, and thinking, okay, how does this affect the patient, and what's the implication for the patient? So that goes back to how we do all the other work we do. In addition to developing grants, we partner with patient advocacy groups on a regular basis because they teach us so much about the patient voice, and those collaborations end up just making us more relevant, I think, to clinicians as well.
Very nice. So tying in educational strategy with patients as faculty, what's the strategy for that? Like, how do you find the right patient? Because I got to imagine that's pretty hard, right?
Yeah, it is. I think the first step is you don't bring a patient into a program unless there's a physician or other healthcare provider who's bringing them in. So usually you want to have a member of your clinical faculty be the one who is responsible for bringing the patient on board. And usually they're the ones who've been caring for these patients, who know them, and assuming that you have a good relationship with the faculty member as well, and you know that they're really good at speaking and communicating, they're going to bring someone on who they believe is going to be good at communicating their story without going too far off script. You really want to focus on teaching moments.
Well, that's excellent. Well, I thought that was excellent, and we're going to have you back on here for the panel. We're going to get to that in the end. So, in the spirit of keeping it moving, like we'll all visualize you dancing off the stage and vacating the couch, and I'll take my sip of coffee, which is actually this Monster Energy. And let's move on to the next. So, Diane, I'd like to welcome our second guest of the show, Diane Albertson, Director of Educational Development at the American Association of Clinical Endocrinology. Diane, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So tell me a little bit about where you work. Where'd you work before that? Little overview of your experience. Tell us about it.
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, I'm currently at the American Association of Clinical Endocrinology. I previously worked at the Society of Critical Care, as well as the American Society for Gastrointestinal Endoscopy. Again, a mouthful. All of my education and I've been working in education all that time, specifically CME, since the beginning of my career. While I got my degree in marketing communications, right off the bat, I found an opportunity that I just really kind of fell in love with, working with education, and in some parts, meeting planning and kind of all those different hats that you wear. I would describe my path as more of a never a dull moment and kind of always growing. I've helped organize live annual meetings with over 5,000 attendees to small, skill-focused hands-on workshops. I've also worked with on policy updates and accreditation, joint accredited programs. So not just the CME, and trying to make sure that we meet all of the requirements for all of our different clinicians, as well as developing faculty and staff training to help train the trainer. As we know, we aren't the only ones that can lead the CME. We have to make sure that our staff and our colleagues understand it as well. Also led a research abstract process, which is kind of a unique thing that typically you don't do. Although we did not offer credit for these, it was an area that just needed help. And we had about 2,000 research abstracts that had to be vetted and scored and so forth, and then ensure they had a place to present within our meeting. So that was a huge, different task, but still kind of really interesting on the research side. I've been involved in an inaugural international program and learned more about how medicine and education works in different countries, as well as those new questions to ask when developing content, like, will this be translated? Is this all in English? How long will this content take to speak to through a translator? So all those different things that you have to take into consideration that you probably wouldn't realize until you start and you find out the hard way in some cases. And most recently, I've been able to experience how we transfer live interactions into a virtual platform, like so many of you have as well. And it's kind of just an ongoing growth.
Very fun. I mean, it's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of diversity. I really like it. Well, why don't you tell me a little bit about this? What about the title, educational development? We heard about educational strategy. Is it similar, different? One word different, I guess, right?
Yeah, so it's in my area, it's new programs, grant programs, new initiatives. I think that I'm a newer staff member that's been added. As these continue to grow, we have some standard programming, and not that other people aren't doing the new, but I think there's a lot of things, especially in endocrinology, with a lot of grant funding. And at some point, there's a big pool of money, which is great for grants, but also we have to kind of pick and choose. So how much time and effort do we have to, go after some of these programs? So I kind of start with the needs. Why are we doing this? What is the big need in endocrinology? There's quite a gamut, the best format to execute, and then kind of reviewing those outcomes and how can the program be sustainable? How do we move forward? Is it something that stays domestic or becomes international? So it's kind of looking at how are we developing and how are we then continuing to move forward? Very
nice. So tell me a little bit about on your association side. What does an average day look like in the CME office?
I think, as we've alluded to earlier, it's typically project management. I think realistically, most of what we do is a project management, keeping all the projects moving along, or the activities of the courses with their development, but knowing and being prepared for a twist, I think, is the key. You have guidelines that CME, ACCME, and other boards require, and there's a lot of how your organization interprets that criteria. So you need to think through all the steps from start to finish, your process, and how do all those steps meet the criteria, and how are you consistently doing them? So it's not just saying, I can just check off a box. You actually have to consistently do that and make sure that it's sustainable. So I found setting up processes and templates have been really key to keeping compliance, as well as to create less of a headache each time you have to create a new activity. And, much of my experience has trained me to expect the unexpected. As we've learned through this process, one year I had to replan an entire annual meeting within 2 months after our hotel and location was hit by Hurricane Katrina. So thankfully I had processes and procedures, but I also had to expect to pivot. I learned how to reuse space and be creative with planning. Different, like I mentioned, those 2,000 abstracts had to become posters in that same location that did not have an existing exhibit hall in our new location for the annual meeting. So you have to, just kind of roll with the punches in some ways and not assume that everything is going to go as planned. But I will say that my work has never been stagnant. It's always what's kept me engaged in this role.
Very good. So I know that you have a lot of experience doing what you call live model CME. I'm interested in hearing a little bit about that. I've never done that.
Yes. Life skills is a whole new area of experience. It's one that I thought I kind of understood, and wow, it's definitely eye-opening and in such a really unique way. In critical care, we did 20 live model stations for an ultrasound training with, I think about 5 to 6 clinicians around the table and rotating into different areas of the ultrasound training. And the ability to use live models was actually very beneficial for our group because it's just like the clinicians would see in the ICU. There's a uniqueness to each model, live model that they would see. And we, interestingly enough, we actually had a model within the fact that the faculty detected a heart issue during this training and very quietly and after the fact referred them to get to their doctor to get a follow-up. Like, how interesting is that when you're literally finding this as you go along. Another memory that I will never forget is our faculty running out of the ultrasound gel through the first portion of the training. And I was asked, can you go run to the nearby Walgreens and go pick up? And I'm like, well, what am I looking for? And they're like, you need 20 bottles of lubricant and get some amazing looks from the cashier when you're trying to do. So, I mean, this was just like other duties is assigned. But at the gastrointestinal endoscopy organization, we did live skills that were done with bovine and porcine models. And we worked with our nursing lab staff to determine what would work best to recreate these polyps in these animal models. And I will tell you a little hint, it's Jell-O and olives. So I don't know. But working with the pre and post coordination for live skills is another entire ballgame of project management. When you learn to get all hands on deck, and you'll most likely have one of those other duties as assigned moments for sure.
Very interesting. So, and I'd imagine you're working with so many different people to coordinate to make that happen, right? Because it's so different.
Absolutely. I mean, people, where do you store the live, bovine models? Like, you have to have a large freezer and they can only sit out for so long and they have to get removed. And do you have enough people that you can move those in and out? And who's kind of taking care to make sure that it's all like sanitary? It is unlike anything I'd ever experienced.
That's wild. Well, thanks so much for sharing. It was great to hear about it. And I know I have a couple of questions I'm definitely going to ask when we get to that panel. So very nice. So let's get up. We'll walk across stage. Lynn's coming in. All right. Welcome, Lynn Callia, to the show. Come on over and sit down on the couch. I'm out of coffee, so I'll virtual you a coffee. So Lynn Callia is the VP and Director of CME Project Management, Haymarket Medical. Lynn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So you want to know where I was and what I did. So
I'd love to hear it.
I go back. I'm a little bit older than anybody else on the show right now. So I do go back to medical economics days in the 90s and started my career actually coming back after kind of not working for many years. And I thought I would kind of dabble. Well, dabble led into a full-time career. And I learned a lot in those days because we had clinical publications. I worked with amazing people, and I started to learn the business of healthcare. When I went to Haymarket, I'm there almost 17 years now. And when I started, we were still doing CME and promo. It wasn't the break yet in the firewalls. So I really learned the business from both sides very quickly and the differences. And when it did split, I stayed with the CME side. And that's kind of how I started in that part of my career. Got my CHCP a few years later, and we became accredited pretty much at that same time. Before that, I should go back. When I was working in medical economics and even Haymarket early on, we worked with other accredited providers. And I got to give Boston University a shout out, and Julie White. Everybody knows Julie. I started learning from Julie, and I started using Boston in those days at medical economics when we started to do some accredited activities. And we have had a great relationship ever since. And we still work with Boston, even though we are accredited ourselves. And then we became jointly accredited for 6 years. We got the 6-year approval in 2019. So that's where I am now, and I have a full team of program managers that work with me.
So tell me, like on the program management side, what do you love about CME? And Diane, I know I forgot to ask you that, so I'm going to come back to you.
Oh, what do I love? Honestly, very quickly, I love the autonomy of it. I love that we can create content and programs that will resonate with healthcare providers. I love working with the different areas. The nurses are amazing, and the doctors, of course, pharmacists. But it really is nice that we can really think about what do we want to do to really make a difference in patient care. And honestly, I also love the window of the world of seeing what's involved in the clinical trials. When you work in promo, you're working on stuff that's already been approved, and that's it, and that's the drug, and that's what it does. And but when you're in CME and you can learn, you hear about the different areas that are being developed, and the therapies that are coming along, and what's in what's around the corner. It really makes you feel like you have a window into some amazing things that are in progress as well.
It's a great answer. So tell me about the title, Director of Program Management. What does that mean at a CME company?
Well, in my company, I have to give a shout out to my program managers. We really are a group that kind of handle pretty much from soup to nuts. So when we work with the development with medical and creative and our educational strategists to develop the proposals. We're involved in those discussions. We develop the budgets. My team submits the grants online. If a grant is sold, then we are involved with all the paperwork that goes along with that, getting CME department to kind of, making sure all our forms are finished and done, and inviting the faculty, really kind of producing the programs. I mean, the program managers, we go from start to finish, and then we end up doing the reconciliations, getting the things posted online or published or whatever has to happen, with, again, working with the medical team and working with all the different stakeholders, in getting this done. But the reason it's kind of like director of, because we have teams that we work on, I guess, with different supporters that we know maybe differently, or we stay in a certain area or a therapeutic area, but there's a lot of crossover because it depends on how much work is coming in or out or being done. So we really do work as a team in having brainstorming and trying to figure out, okay, you got this to handle, let's think about that. I had this, let's apply it. So I think that kind of role, just having that umbrella title has helped the entire team to kind of, use each other and myself as a soundboarding, and we do that a lot to kind of get ourselves, keep everything on track. They also, I do want to say, because I work for a large company, we have a very big portfolio of products. I mean, we don't, HME does, but like the company is big, it's medical publishing. So we have to know a lot about, understand the other resources a large company can bring to the table. So each of the program managers have to stay on top of that as well. And, any kind of product designs or designs portfolios that we want to put forth. Again, if someone's working on something different, we really want them to kind of do a little dog and pony show for the rest of us, so we all stay on track and we all are knowledgeable kind of at the same time. So that's how our group works, if that explains it. But timelines, everything, things Diane said, Dave said, you've got to kind of stay in touch with all the people that are working on all the components so you can keep it all together.
It sounds like a lot of stuff. And I guess it also kind of, it challenges the common misconception that program management is like, after a grant is funded, you just kind of throw it over the fence, right? And then you kind of grab it and you try to run with it. So that doesn't sound true at all.
Yeah, no. We do live, we do virtual, we go on site, we do logistics. I mean, it's everything, and actually it's like, I always say, people say, what do you do? Like if I meet someone outside and I go, easiest to say this, I produce medical education programs for doctors and nurses. Then, I mean, literally, that's what we do. It's not just the hands-on production, but it's from here to here, So, but that kind of brings it down to a level that could explain it easier. So
that's a good one. I'm going to take that as a good action point, because the last time I got asked what I did at a baseball game, I missed the game. So it took me a long time to walk
I
through what
tried
it was.
once trying to explain it, and they went, "What?" And I said, "All right."
Yeah. I lost the person when I said, "Have you ever been to a doctor?" And they tilted their head and they said, "I haven't been to a doctor since I was a kid." I was like, "All right, well, this is not going to work." Right? So we had another conversation after that one, but excellent. So thanks so much, Lynn. We're going to move over into our panel section. So I'd like to invite everybody over. And before we take any official questions, I got to ask Diane, why do you love CME? I forgot to ask you. I'm dying to hear.
You know, I love CME for the well-rounded person that it's allowed me to become. You know, my nature is to problem solve, and really everything we do in CME is answering a problem or a need. Sometimes that leads us down like an educational path or a process path that needs fixing, or just answering a natural disaster pandemic path, which we've all been in. The people that I've met and have been able to work with have made the journey invaluable in CME. And I honestly will say that it's been more rewarding than the destination times. I recall after an extremely draining 4-day annual meeting, having lunch before a group of us were headed home, some of the staff, and a participant came up to us in our table and thanked us for helping run a fabulous event. And I realized that in this role, we get to make an impact to medical education. And I personally just like being part of something that's bigger than me.
Great answer.
So Phil, I'm gonna do my Paul Schaefer and cut in with a few questions that have come in on our Medscape text line that I want to throw out to our panel before you kind of get everything organized. So Dave, this first question is for you. You mentioned that RMEI, your organization, is HIPAA compliant, I believe is the term you used. What exactly does that mean? What exactly does that entail?
It entails a lot of paperwork and a lot of forms being filled out. I honestly didn't spearhead that effort at all, but I can say that everybody in the company had to fill out certain forms to verify how and whether we would be handling patient data. You know, we work with patients as faculty. We handle a variety of other types of patient data through different types of programs we do. So a lot of it is to make sure that we have data privacy structures in place to ensure that data doesn't go anywhere once it resides with us, unless that destination is approved by the patient. But there's a lot more technical stuff to it, and a lot of it is quite a bit of paperwork. And the same way that you go through a ton of paperwork and documentation to get accreditation, the HIPAA compliance process is pretty rigorous.
Okay. So our next question, I think this is actually pretty interesting. Have you ever told your own personal healthcare providers what you do? And have you ever gotten sort of an interesting reaction or response from them?
Definitely have.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they've been kind of like, you're doing CME? What?
I'd be similar. I think once they say, oh, like the CME or like accreditation, and then I say, yeah, like the boards and this, and then they're like, oh, okay, so like you know some of the stuff that I know in regards to like what we're talking about. And I'm like, sure, okay. And I've also been like, oh, are you a nurse? And I'm like, no, I'm not.
Yeah,
Okay.
I once worked for a company that focused exclusively on NPs and PAs, and I was a couple of times I would encounter a PA or an NP, you know, with a checkup of some sort, and I'd say, hey, do you know us? And they're like, no, don't know you. And that's kind of an awkward conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One more question I'll throw out. So this came over as well. Can the panelists answer how societies and medical education companies can successfully partner on educational initiatives?
How we can, a society, well, it wasn't a society, but I can give one example how we successfully, we partnered with the American College of Cardiology on a big program. Actually, it went on, there was one set and then we had an extension and we did another arm of it. And it was an amazing collaboration. And we did it very successfully by a lot of meetings, talking online, in face, We went there. We were at the college several times, met them at different association meetings, and we stayed in constant communication. So it was very successful. It was 18, at least, I want to say 18 different programs we did in the one grouping and more in the second. And it was all on, obviously, heart failure. But it was, we did it again very successfully because we really did stay in touch. We almost had the same parallel team from our side working with their side. So we were talking, the same people were talking to each other. It was very well. It was a very successful program.
That's really good, Lynn, because I've been in collaborations that have worked well and some that have not.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really good question to bring up because I do think collaborations is the way that we have to start thinking. I will also say one thing, that they take time to get started. You know, understanding each other's rules and processes and procedures, that's a huge part of figuring out how to move forward with your actual task. You know, you have to ensure that you have invested enough time for the discovery and the timeline, that everybody's on the same page. And believe it or not, it takes a lot longer than you think, because you think you're all on the same page, but you literally have to drill down to those specifics.
Yes.
And that's the only way that it's going to be successful. So I would say definitely take the time and just know that it's going to take that initial time before you can actually get into the actual content.
That's excellent, Diane. That really does phrase it beautifully, exactly how it has to start and continue. Yep.
Yeah, I think in the cases where we've worked with associations and societies, I think the first step often has to be with the association and society saying, okay, we do such a constellation of activities, but there's certain things that we're not good at, and we want to look for a partner provider who is good at these things. So first recognizing, okay, there's an area where this company can support our overall association society mission, and reaching out or maybe going through an RFP process. But then, you know, to Diane's point, it takes 6-12 months to really form that relationship and create the trust, and also a kind of a free exchange of here's what we're good at, here's what you're good at. Let's see if we can kind of mesh these two areas and focus on that. So that's often because, you know, societies and associations have such a kind of holistic approach to maintain the relationship with their members that it is often a challenge to say, here, we can help you do that.
All right, great. Well, I'm going to turn it back to Phil, but I think we are also going to do our next audience response question.
Yeah, I think that this is a really interesting conversation, especially about collaborations, because I think that collaborations and partnerships are really the best way to leverage our individual experience collectively and create some of the most interesting programs, right? So why don't we ask an ARS question on that, because it sounds like that was planned as part of the conversation. So good question. So let's go to number 4, actually, not this one. Can we skip this one? Yeah. Here we go. So what does your typical collaboration at your organization look like? So do you not collaborate? Do you just handle everything within inside your own team? And this is anonymous, so it's okay. While you do collaborations, is it most likely or most often with other like sister companies? So maybe something that's in your own organization, just not specifically in your office. C would be, we do the collaboration, but the other collaborator is the one that does the heavy lifting. And D would be, you know, we collaborate and we do most of the heavy lifting. So let's kind of see where that falls in. The tie.
Boring.
I really wish we got that band. It would have been so good. So what does our panel think about something like that? Well, you know, kind of 2 questions. What does this mean to you, Dave? Why don't you start us off? And what do you think of the responses? And give me some thoughts on collaboration.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, we're very much externally oriented in collaboration. You know, we have, you know, built out key functions like outcomes and medical and travel planning and all that stuff. But there's always something, again, to my earlier point, like field of education and medical education is rapidly evolving so much that there's always a new technology or a new type of provider out there who's doing something that isn't in our wheelhouse. And so I think we fit more in that last run there, where we collaborate all the time, but mostly it's us doing the heavy lifting. We'll usually identify a couple of key elements in an intervention that we want to launch, and see that those are things that we're going to have to go outside for. But we do most of the overall work. So, and yeah, that it's not often where we're going with external organizations and they're doing most of the heavy lifting. That's kind of my initial thought here.
This is interesting. I actually I agree with what you say, and I think it's very interesting that nobody said A, which is that they don't collaborate. So, maybe there's some people that are embellishing the truth a little bit, but that's a good sign. Diane, tell us about your collaboration. I know from the society side and the association side, we're very interested in that.
I think, kind of what I mentioned before. I mean, it's just getting on the same page with the process and just how you're going to approach it is huge. And I will say that in CME, I think it's almost even a little bit more difficult. I find that you sometimes are dealing with two groups that are both accredited providers, and they both have their own process. Like, I'm going to review this with my medical ed team, and the other group will too, even though one is taking the ultimate responsibility. So I think that collaboration in general, both of us doing the same thing isn't helpful. We need to figure out, as we mentioned earlier, what is the strengths and weaknesses of your group that you need assistance with, and or just divide it up so that these collaborations aren't so kind of cumbersome. I feel that we can make this better. I think we're all trying to figure out how it looks, how it should look, and how we can make it better, because we need to be collaborating. I mean, we need to collaborate on so many different things, because we've seen grants are looking for it now. They don't want to just see one organization submit. So we have to get better at this. And, resources are being cut. So maybe the same things that you were able to do before, you're not able to. So I just think that we need to look at the collaboration efforts and just really make sure it's working. It's kind of a give and a take in that area. And also that both groups are, I hate when you see somebody's having to do the heavy lifting, because that's unfortunate, because I feel that, well, it may be heavy lifting in some ways, the other organization should also be, maybe it's the group that has the audience that you're needing and you're working to put together the activity. But that group should be able to provide you with data. So that data is important, and it is really crucial to what, how you need to put together your activity and kind of meet that audience. So I think it's just more of that mindset about what is everybody bringing to the table. Let's make sure that we're really utilizing that best and not just both doing the same thing on two different, platforms and saying it's a collaboration.
Very interesting. So we've got about 6-7 minutes left, and I want to talk about two things. So one is, from all of our different perspectives, what do you think the next 6 months or 2 years looks like in CME? Pandemic aside, I mean, I guess hopefully we're getting through it and we'll come out of it soon. But that's sort of like the easy answer. Like, what's new and what's going to change in CME these days? Who wants to take that one first? How about Lynn?
Yeah. Well, in the next 6 months really is the back and forth between live and virtual and trying to manage that. So that's what we're kind of managing and looking at, and also the more of the impetus is going on multi-support and trying to manage that in the next so the 6 months, 2 years, kind of trying to manage that, because that's a different workflow in the when do you start kind of program, when do you start it if you're still waiting for funding, and how do you do and changes the scope and things like that. So that as far as what's new, what we're looking at in our company in the next 2 years is some new innovative products that we can bring the information, do the same good job we do in the therapeutic area, but kind of enhance some delivery options. We're looking at some data behind the scenes of what we can bring. We can kind of add to justify or to explain a little bit more why this might be better using it in this way or producing it in that way. So the next 2 years for our company, I think it's a lot of product and discussions from a larger scale. Again, we have a lot of e-journals, clinical journals, they're e-published. Well, there's another question maybe that may come up, but anyway, so that's where we are short term, trying to get through kind of managing the landscape right now with the changing. We've got 2 live meetings coming up. We are going to live in the next 2 weeks, and already 2 faculty may have a problem with travel due to, restrictions. So we work around those things, and we will continue to do that until that's all leveled out.
Excellent. Dave, what do you think? I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. I think in 6 months, we're going to be at live in-person meetings. And I think that's going to continue on through the next 2 years. But all of those, especially at live major congresses, are going to be hybrid. I think most medical societies are going to figure out that there's always going to be a certain cohort that just won't be going on site, at least not for the next 2 years. So there'll always be some kind of hybrid option offered, but we'll be back traveling, hopefully, looks like to Europe next year and around the US. And I think that virtual learning on a local meeting level, I think, is going to become more the norm. You just do a lot in person and other things like that. And I believe that a lot of these institutions and health system sites are finding the efficiency of virtual meetings, and we're going to do a lot more of those virtual regional meetings than ever before. And I think that's going to be here to stay. But I definitely see 6 months being back on site at conferences as more of a regular occurrence.
Very good. All right, Diane, what do you think? Next 6 months, 2 years? What's it look like?
I agree. I think that the biggest hurdle we have is we've all done a really good job of switching to virtual, and I think we now have to manage expectations. Kind of what you were saying, Dave, that there is some understanding that things will continue this way because you've done it. But I think that not everything will always be hybrid, and I think that organizations are now going to have to look at what works really well virtually and what do we need to keep live. I know that what I've heard from our members is that, we'll just always be doing hybrid for everything. And behind the scenes, we're like, not manageable. We cannot sustain that model in this current environment. But we can look at what did work well virtually. And we would like to continue, and we'd like to adapt and expand on that. And we know that we're reaching new audiences that we never reached before, but we do have to manage those expectations. So I think that'll be a key part to look at over the next 6 months.
I think that's a great answer. Lots of good views on the next 6 months to 2 years. Sounds very optimistic, which I very much appreciate as an optimistic person myself. If you didn't know that, I guess, right? So I'd love to get some final thoughts. We got about 2 minutes, so we'll keep them brief. 30 seconds, final thoughts. Let's go to Dave, because I cut you off last time, and I feel terrible about it.
I'm a little resentful over it, so I'm going to go over 2 minutes, just out of payback. No, I feel really optimistic about the future of the field, about the people who are in it now. It's harder to be in the adaptation and evolution required, but I think as a result, we've got a cohort of amazing people in this field who are really dedicated and creative and thoughtful, and it's kind of what so I guess I would say the main problem that we have to grapple with is how we're assessing impact of our initiatives over time, and what our data narrative is. Grants that were produced maybe a year ago into the ones that are being produced today, so that all of our stakeholders understand the true impact of what we do.
Excellent final thoughts. Lynn, how about you? Final thoughts.
Final thoughts. I feel, I think Diane said one thing, in our world of program management, expect the unexpected. We will continue to do that because that's reality. But as a final thought, I really think that I know our company is behind CME 100%, and we have a lot of resources we can use and bring to the table, and our management is really working very hard, like I said, to use the resources we have to inform how we move forward with different programs and activities. Again, the content is going to always be the balanced, objective, scientifically rigorous. I mean, that's our mantra, but how we deliver it and what we can bring forth and how we can really keep our members interested. And that is one thing we don't have time to talk about, but quickly, we do one thing. We did something very self-funded not that long ago. And this is a great topic. And the title was, should you refer your IBS patients to a GI psychologist? Now, that's not something that's going to be funded, but let me tell you, it was amazing. We got amazing results. Our members were happy. So we are doing things in that vein to really bring forth a little something different. So.
Very nice. Excellent final thoughts. Diane, final thoughts.
I think that obviously the unknown, like we don't know what's happening and things will continue to change and expect the unexpected, but I do want to provide some comfort. I hope everybody can remember, don't do this in a silo. Don't do this on your own. I've learned that you need everyone within your organization as a partner. The insights and data that say marketing can provide right now, what's going on, it's invaluable to what you do and how you're connecting with your content and who's not connecting. You know, members of my customer service team have provided key questions they've received and they've addressed. And then I've had to shift and say, okay, we need to add that copy to our language here, or we need to update this process to make it easier to access. Obviously, my partners in technology have been invaluable as we've gone through this pandemic, figure out new ways, things I never even knew of that existed, that I'm like, I need to find a way to do X. And they were my sounding board. They say, I think I've got a plan for you, or I've got an option for you. I think just understanding even how your organization's governance process works, it will help you in times of the need to know a process to which what needs to get approved by a board. And you don't want to go down a path where you've done all this work and now it's just like you're at a standstill. So I think really knowing, have conversations within your organization. If you have a team, you have people that are there, be inclusive in your process. It will make your program so much better, robust, and you'll have buy-in from all of your organizations. So whatever path it is, just include your group and include your team. It's not just the education department, it's your entire organization that really has a benefit and a buy-in to this.
Excellent. And what a great way to end. My final thought is that I think we have a great panel. We've got a great experience. We've got a lot of diversity and a lot of good perspectives. So I learned a lot. I hope everybody else learned a lot. I want to thank our panel for spending time here with us. I'd like to thank Scott and Derek for the work that they've done. And of course, the sponsors for this session and the entire CMEpalooza, which there were a lot of them. And it would take the whole rest of the day to read through them. So I'll skip it. But thanks so much.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Phil.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to our panel. So just a quick note for those of you who are watching this either live or the recorded version, please click on the survey link at the bottom of the live tab to help us get a sense of who's watching CMEpalooza Fall. It is only a few questions. And for those of you who are watching this live, our next session will begin in about 2 minutes. So you don't need to refresh your browser. Just look on our live page and click the appropriate link. It'll start shortly. One thing I can guarantee is CMEpalooza Spring will be back next year. We will be, as we always are, online. So we are one of the few meetings that didn't need to pivot. So we will certainly be back again in 2022. So with that, I'd like to thank Phil and Lynn and Diane and Dave, and for everyone who watched today, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.